Wei An had never forgotten where he came from. His mother ran a small grocery, their family barely scraping by. Every book, every exam, every late night at the library had been a battle for a future that seemed just out of reach. When the acceptance letter from Huaxia University arrived, so did the scholarship that made it possible. A full ride under the Shen Group Education Fund. The irony was cruel, because if there was one person Wei An despised more than anyone, it was Shen Ruilin. Their rivalry stretched back through childhood. Shen Ruilin, the flawless alpha heir, stood at the top of every class, every competition, every court. Wei An, sharp-tongued and relentless, clawed his way up from nothing, only to be second place to him again and again. He remembered their final high school debate. The gymnasium lights harsh overhead as Shen dismantled his arguments with that infuriating precision. Only to linger afterward, eyes lingering too long on Wei An's flushed face, a hunger flickering beneath the taunt. No matter how high you climb, Wei An, don't forget. Your future still stands on money from my family. That wound never healed, so in university Wei An avoided him like the plague. He worked part-time jobs, studied late, and kept his distance. The last thing he wanted was to owe Shen Ruilin anything, not acknowledgement, not attention, not even a glance. But fate didn't care about what he wanted. That night, an old classmate, Louis, had returned from abroad and invited everyone to a reunion dinner. Wei An went only out of obligation. He sat quietly, picking at his food, until the air shifted. Shen Ruilin walked in. The suit, the quiet confidence, the faint trace of lychee in the air, he hadn't changed at all. Immediately, the table's energy gravitated to him. Toasts, laughter, admiration, as if he owned the room. Wei An stayed at the far end, lips pressed thin. It shouldn't matter anymore, they weren't competing. He could ignore him. But the alcohol burned strangely hot. Too hot. His skin flushed, his pulse stuttered, and a sharp ache twisted in his gut. Panic gripped him. This wasn't drunkenness. His whole body was on fire. He excused himself, stumbling upstairs to the attached hotel and booked a room just to collapse on the bed. Breath ragged, he clutched at the sheets as realization dawned. He wasn't a beta after all. At 20, long past the usual age, he was presenting as an Omega, alone, weak, in heat. He remembered Louis's easy promise, "Text me when you're safe." His trembling hands fumbled with his phone. Made it, not home, got a room. Sick? Bring medicine? Room 1301. He dropped the phone, desperate just to breathe. Half an hour later, the doorbell rang. Relief flickered. Louis had come. Wei An dragged himself to the door and pulled it open. And froze. Shen Ruilin stood there, phone in hand, eyes dark and unreadable. On the screen, Wei An's desperate message glowed. Sent not to Louis, but to him. The air shifted instantly. The alpha's lychee pheromones swept over him, colliding with Wei An's uncontrolled Omega heat like a storm. Wei An's world tilted, and in that moment the first mistake was made. The instant Shen Ruilin stepped inside, Wei An knew disaster had struck. His knees weakened as unbearable heat tore through him, skin feverish, breath shallow, every nerve screaming for relief. The Omega presentation he had never prepared for hit him in full force, raw and unshielded. He stumbled backward, only to be caught in a grip that was far too steady, far too familiar. Shen's hand, hot and firm around his wrist, steadied him effortlessly. "Let go," Wei An hissed. But his voice broke into a shudder, shame curling in his stomach. Shen's eyes darkened. His nostrils flared, catching the delicate, ringing scent of lily of the valley rising helplessly from Wei An's skin. He swallowed hard, voice strained. You're an Omega. Wei An forced out a bitter laugh. No, you're smelling things. Your whole family are Omegas. But even as he tried to joke, his body betrayed him, trembling. Pheromones flooding the small hotel room in waves of desperate sweetness. Shen inhaled sharply, jaw tightening as if in pain. The lychee edge of his own scent spread like wildfire, intoxicating, invasive. His pupils dilated, predatory, red glint flickering in his gaze. Damn it, Wei An, stop looking at me like that. You'll push me over. Wei An wanted to shove him away, scream anything. But instead his fingers curled into the front of Shen's shirt, dragging him closer against every logical thought. His body craved the heat, the pressure, the grounding strength of an alpha. The air turned suffocating. Lychee and lily of the valley twined, pheromones clawing at each other until Wei An could barely think. His breath hitched as Shen pressed him against the wall, their foreheads almost touching. You don't understand what this means, Shen growled, voice roughened by rut, restraint fraying with every second. Wei An tried to fight, but his body was trembling too hard, his skin too hot. Shame and desire burned in equal measure as he gasped, Then teach me, if you're so desperate. The last thread of control snapped. Shen's lips crashed onto his, a brutal, consuming kiss that stole the breath from his lungs. Wei An twisted in protest, but his resistance dissolved into ragged moans as the alpha's pheromones invaded every inch of him, dragging him deeper into the pull. Hands roamed, Shen's grip iron on his waist, pinning him in place, while his other hand cupped Wei An's neck, thumb brushing dangerously close to the sensitive gland. The touch sent sparks down his spine, his body arching against its own will. When Shen finally bit into his gland, Wei An cried out, half pain, half unbearable pleasure, a searing burn hot through him, tying them together, branding him in a way no contract or rivalry ever could. Waves of molten gold flooded his veins, Shen's lychee essence rewriting his every cell, until hate blurred into hunger, the lines between enemy and anchor dissolving in the haze. Wei An clawed at Shen's back, nails leaving angry red trails through fabric, torn between wanting to escape and craving more, his pride shattered under the heat, his body answering shamelessly to every press of teeth, every surge of pheromone. When it was over, Wei An collapsed against Shen's chest, trembling, scent still tangled thick in the air. Shen's voice was hoarse, dangerous in its certainty. You're mine now, Wei An. Permanently. Wei An shut his eyes, fury mixing with something far more dangerous, an echo of need. Because no matter how much he hated Shen Rulin, his body had betrayed him completely. When Wei An woke the next morning, the hotel room was quiet, the sheets heavy with a scent that didn't belong to him. His body ached. His mind replayed flashes he couldn't bear to look at too closely. The mark burned faintly at his neck, a brand that no amount of scrubbing could wash away. Shen Rulin was still asleep, his features calm, almost boyish in repose. For a heartbeat, Wei An stared, chest twisting with something between fear and disbelief. Then Shen stirred, murmuring sleepily, Wei An, stay. His arm reaching out in the haze of post-rut haze, fingers brushing Wei An's hip, with a tenderness that cracked something deep inside him. It was too much, too soft, too real. The panic slammed back in full force. He couldn't stay. Not like this. By the time Shen fully woke, Wei An was gone. He didn't have money for plane tickets or the luxury of disappearing overseas. What he did have was desperation. By the next evening, he'd boarded a long-distance bus Heading far from the city's glass towers and neon haze, he carried one duffel bag, his degree certificate folded at the bottom like a lifeline. The bus rattled for hours, leaving behind the skyline that had defined his rivalry with Shen since childhood. In its place rose low-roofed houses, rice fields, and the kind of silence that belonged to people with simpler lives. In a small county town, Wei On found work at a local middle school. The principal, impressed by his grades, offered him a position as a substitute teacher. The pay was little, the room he rented smaller still, but it was enough to keep him fed. He threw himself into routines, grading papers, teaching grammar, sweeping the dusty classroom floor. He told himself this was freedom, that obscurity was safety. But at night, when the bond tugged at his chest like an invisible chain, he lay awake in the narrow bed, sweat dampening the sheets as his body reeled through heats he barely understood. Heats clawed at him like thorns, suppressants dulling the edge but not the ghost of Shen's teeth, leaving him curled fetal, whispering curses into the dark. The lychee phantom scent teasing at the edges of his fevered dreams. Suppressants were expensive, and even when he managed to buy a few, they never worked as well as they should. He endured, biting his knuckles to stay silent, praying his landlord didn't notice. 2 months later, dizziness became a constant companion. When the village clinic doctor frowned at the results, Wei On thought for a moment his secret had been exposed. Instead, the man gave a quiet nod and handed him a slip of paper. "Congratulations," the doctor said gently. "You're over 8 weeks along." The world tilted. Wei On clutched the paper, his pulse racing. He should have been terrified. And he was. But beneath the panic came something else. A fragile, dangerous tenderness. A child. His and Shen Ruilin's. For the first time since fleeing, Wei On's eyes blurred with something other than exhaustion. He had no savings, no plan, no idea how to raise a baby in a town where even chalk was rationed. But he also knew one thing. He would keep this child. The months passed. His body changed. His world shrank. He worked as long as he could, then took leave when the pregnancy grew too heavy to hide. His colleagues whispered, the townsfolk speculated, but he ignored them. In the dim light of his rented room, he folded tiny second-hand clothes, patched with uneven stitches but full of care. Loneliness weighed on him, yet when he pressed his hand to his belly and felt the faint kick, something within him steadied. This child was his anchor, his proof that life could grow, even in exile. And so, while the city moved on, and Shen Ruilin surely returned to his empire, Wei On vanished into the quiet rhythm of rural life. To everyone else, he was just another teacher who'd come from the city, a man too young to already have tired eyes. But every night as he rocked himself to sleep with one hand over the swell of his stomach, Wei On knew the truth he could never tell. He was bonded, marked, and hiding from the one alpha who would never let him go. 3 years slipped away like sand through fingers. Wei On lived quietly in a small riverside town, far from the glass towers and political games of the city. To the townsfolk, he was simply Teacher Wei. Earnest, dependable, a young man who taught literature at the middle school and raised his son alone. His days were ordinary, yet filled with the kind of fragile happiness he had once thought impossible. Mornings began with little Mingyu tugging at his sleeve, demanding, "Hey, Daddy, hurry, we'll be late." Evenings ended with the boy curled against him, asleep before the lanterns outside dimmed. Their rented home was modest but warm, textbooks stacked on the desk, patched curtains swaying in the breeze, and Mingyu's childish drawings taped crookedly on the walls. At festivals, they lit paper lanterns together. Wei An always wished for the same thing: peace, just one more year of peace. And yet the bond was never silent. On restless nights, Wei An woke drenched in sweat, the phantom echo of a hand at his scent gland, a voice whispering his name. He told himself the bond was stretched thin by distance, that Shen Ruilin must have long forgotten him. But the thread remained, faint, unbroken, tugging whenever he dared to believe he was safe. One evening after a school event, a local alpha from the neighboring village lingered too long at the gate, nostrils flaring as he caught a whiff of Wei An's lingering heat traces. "You smell unsettled, Teacher Wei. Need help with that?" The words dripped with false concern, but the bond flared like jealousy uncoiled, a sharp tug in Wei An's chest that sent him recoiling, heart pounding, as if Shen himself had scented the threat from miles away. He sent the man away with a curt dismissal, but the echo lingered, a reminder that safety was always one breath from shattering. He never told Mingyu who his father was. How could he? To say the name Shen Ruilin would summon a world he had fought to escape. Still, whenever Mingyu laughed with that same sharp tilt of his lips, echoing the infuriating smirk from their final exam war, when Shen had leaned in close after victory, breath warm against Wei An's ear. Whenever his gaze mirrored the arrogance of another man's eyes, Wei An felt a knife twist in his chest. Meanwhile, in the city, Shen Ruilin had not forgotten. The morning Wei An disappeared, Shen woke to an empty bed, a faint trace of lilies on the sheets, and an ache in his chest where the bond had been forged. He had expected fury, guilt, denial, anything but silence. Instead, Wei An had vanished as if he'd never existed. For 3 years, Shen searched. He scoured alumni lists, pulled favors through the Shen family's vast network, followed paper trails across universities and cities. At first, he believed Wei An had gone abroad. Rumors even said he was in America. Shen flew across oceans, chasing ghosts. Each time he returned empty-handed. What finally gave him the thread was a slip. An old classmate of Wei An's posted a photo of a rural school charity event, a teacher standing in the background with a familiar slope of shoulders. Shen's men dug deeper and the details fell into place: a scholarship record, a teaching contract. A small town no one of his status should have ever cared about. He had found him, the doorway. It was late summer when the past arrived. Cicadas screamed in the trees. Wei An was washing vegetables in a chipped basin. Mingyu bent over his homework with a stub of pencil. The knock on the door was low, deliberate. Wei An opened it. And the years he had carefully built crumbled in an instant. Shen Ruilin stood there, suit wrinkled from travel, eyes burning with exhaustion and something far sharper. His scent struck like a storm. Lychee sweetness laced with bitterness. "Wei An?" His voice was hoarse but steady. "Do you mind explaining why I woke up one morning and my other half was just gone?" Wei An's breath caught, his knees threatened to buckle, and then, "Daddy?" Mingyu's soft voice piped up, peeking from behind his father's legs, eyes wide with curiosity. "Who's this uncle?" "He smells like candy. Can he stay for dinner?" The silence cracked like thunder. Shen's gaze darted to the boy, then back to Wei An. For the first time in years, his carefully controlled composure broke, disbelief and fury warring with something far more dangerous in his eyes. Wei An's secret was out. The past he thought buried had come to claim him. The room felt suffocating after Mingyu's door clicked shut. Silence, heavy and dangerous, hung between them. Shen Ruilin stood tall in the small living room, his suit jacket rumpled, hair slightly disheveled. His usual perfection was gone, replaced by something raw Anger, exhaustion, and a dangerous possessiveness. Wei An pressed back against the wall, his pulse racing, every nerve on edge. He had dreamed of this moment in his nightmares. Shen finding him, the truth laid bare. Now that it was real, it was worse than anything he imagined. Shen's voice cut through the air, low and sharp. 3 years. Do you have any idea what you put me through? Wei An's lips trembled. I dash. You disappeared, Shen continued, his words like blades. Without a word. After bonding me, after tying me to you for life, you vanished. Do you know what that bond felt like? Like being dragged into hell every night, and then today? His voice dropped, trembling with restrained fury. I find you living quietly with my son. Wei An's fists clenched. He's mine. I raised him. You weren't there. Shen surged forward, slamming a hand against the wall beside Wei An's head. His pheromones flared, heavy with dominance, the scent of lychee flooding the small house. Shen's breath ghosted his gland, reigniting the mark like live wire. Wei An's traitorous body arching into the threat, a shiver of unwanted heat coiling low in his belly. Wei An's knees nearly buckled under the weight of it, his Omega instinct screaming both fear and something dangerously close to surrender. Don't you dare, Shen hissed, face inches from his. Don't you dare say he's only yours. He's my blood, Wei An, ours. Wei An's throat ached as he forced the words out. I ran because I was scared. Scared of you. Scared of the bond. Scared of losing myself. Shen's expression twisted, half fury, half something else. His grip on Wei An's wrist tightened until it hurt. You think I would have abandoned you? That I would have left you to face this alone? His voice cracked, but he forced it back into steel. You were mine, Wei An. You've always been mine. Wei An tried to meet his gaze, but the intensity burned. You hated me our whole lives. Don't stand here and pretend otherwise. For the first time, Shen laughed, short, sharp, bitter. Hated you? Is that what you thought? That all those years of chasing, competing, taunting were hate? His eyes darkened, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You were the only one I ever saw. The only one I couldn't let go of? Remember that debate in the gym? I tore into your points not to win, but because arguing with you made me feel alive, your fire pulling at me even then. And that night, his voice faltered, breath heavy. That night you gave yourself to me. And then you left me with nothing. The bond between them thrummed, raw and unhealed, pulling tight until Wei An could hardly breathe. From behind the closed bedroom door, Mingyu's soft voice broke the silence. Daddy, are you mad at the uncle? Wei An's chest constricted. Shen's grip loosened, but his eyes stayed locked on him, hungry, furious, desperate. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The storm of confrontation had left the room raw and heavy. But as Mingyu's footsteps faded down the hall with the caretaker, silence returned. A silence too sharp, too full of the words left unspoken. Wei An stood rigid by the door, one hand gripping the frame as though he might bolt again. Shen Rulin sat collapsed on the sofa, the fury still etched into his jaw, but his eyes clouded with something far more fragile. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Shen's voice, hoarse, cut through the quiet. You ran because you thought I didn't want you. Wei An's lips trembled. He wanted to deny it, but the truth slipped out in a whisper. You always looked at me like I was your enemy. I thought that night it was just heat and rut, that it meant nothing. And after, I couldn't risk you taking him away from me. I couldn't risk losing Mingyu. At the sound of the boy's name, Shen's expression broke. He pressed a hand to his temple, almost laughing at the absurdity of it all. 3 years? Do you have any idea what those 3 years were for me? Every city, every lead, I chased them all. I wasn't searching for an Omega. I wasn't searching for a child. I was searching for you. Wei An turned, startled. The raw honesty in Shen's voice left no room for doubt. He wasn't lying. Shen rose slowly and crossed the space between them. He stopped only a step away, as though afraid Wei An might retreat again. I've been a fool. I thought if I demanded, if I forced, you'd stay. But you're not a chain I can hold. You've always been fire, always slipping past my grasp. And still, you were the only one who ever mattered. The weight of those words struck deeper than anger ever had. Wei An's chest tightened, the walls he'd built crumbling under the sincerity shining in Shen's gaze. I can't undo the past, Shen continued softer now. But give me a chance. Not as an alpha claiming an omega, not because of a bond, but as Ruilin, just a man who's loved you far longer than I ever admitted. Wei An's knees weakened. He remembered the years of rivalry, the endless bickering, the heat of that night and the lonely mornings after. But most of all, he remembered the exhaustion in Shen's eyes when he'd appeared at his door, an alpha worn raw by years of searching. Slowly Wei An let go of the door frame. His voice trembled as he spoke. I don't know if I can forgive everything yet, but I'm tired too. Maybe it's time I stopped running. Shen exhaled, relief flooding his face. Tentatively, he reached out, fingers brushing Wei An's wrist. This time, Wei An didn't pull away. The accidental touch sparked, like dry tinder, a minor echo of heat rippling through them both. Shen's rut-shadowed growl low in his throat. Wei An's gland throbbing with a sweet ache that pulled a gasp from his lips. It was fleeting. A promise of storms yet to come, but enough to ground them in the now. The tension snapped, not with passion, but with a quiet, aching kiss. It wasn't the fevered desperation of their bond, nor the reckless hunger of their youth. It was steady, lingering. The kind of kiss that carried both regret and promise. When they parted, foreheads pressed together, Shen whispered, "Let's start over. You, me, and Ming Yu. A family if you'll let me." Wei An closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine what that might feel like. And for the first time, he didn't feel the urge to run. Months later, under the glow of festival lanterns, the three of them knelt together by the riverbank. Ming Yu's small hands fumbled with the paper, his laughter bright as Shen guided him steady. Wei An watched, the bond humming contentedly in his chest, not a chain, but a quiet warmth, weaving them into something whole.